Hi everyone, today we are going to be creating a piece of artwork that goes with the story Lines That Wiggle. So I have two different pieces of paper because there's two different ways that we can really do this, and you can follow along with whichever one that you like. This side, my left, is going to be for this would be much like the standard picture that I normally have kids do if we're in class together and if we have access to paints. So if you have access to paints at home, you might try this one. This one on my right is going to be more for my friends who don't have paint but still want their artwork to be nice and bright and colorful. So let's get started. On this one, I'm going to draw the line first, I'm going to talk about it, and then I'm going to repeat that line over here in a different way. So I always tell my students we start with the hardest line in the whole wide world to get it out of the way. It's not really the hardest. So what I'm going to do is I am going to draw a nice straight line, as straight as I can. It's okay if it's not perfect, all the way across my paper. So I touch both sides of my paper here. Over here, this is going to be my colorful one. I'm going to add a straight line, but I can put it in a different spot, and it doesn't have to be going the same direction. What I'm really looking for is, can you try your best to draw a straight line? So while this line is slanted, or it is a diagonal line, it is still straight. So the diagonal talks about the direction of it, not the kind of line. Because I could have made this a bumpy line on a diagonal, and then it would be a diagonal bumpy line. Next, on this one, so I'm only going to be using a black crayon on this one. What I'm going to do is I just drew my straight line. Next, what I'm going to do is I am going to draw a wiggly line. Or a curvy line, because I curve up, curve down, curve up, curve down, curve up, curve down, curve up, curve down, curve up, curve down. And I go, again, all the way across my paper. So I left a little bit of space, and I drew my curved line. Over here, I can draw my curvy line in a different direction. I can even make them overlap. So I'm going to draw a nice curvy line in a different color. That way. So I'm still demonstrating that I can draw different kinds of lines, but I'm just showing it in a different way. Either way is totally fine. My next line is one of my favorite lines, and that's a zigzag line. And I tell my students that sometimes I find it helpful to say it as they draw it. So I go zig, zag, zig, zag, zig, zag, zig, zag, zig, zag, zig, all the way across. Zig, zag, zig, zag, zig, zag, and I would go all the way down. I can go right through that curvy line. Okay, so I have 3 lines over here and 3 lines over here. And again, you are just doing one. You do not have to do both. One is totally fine. The next line I'm going to draw is a bumpy line. So I'm going to go bump, 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 and a little one. And here, maybe I'm going to turn my paper So I'll go in a different direction. Maybe I'll go bump, 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 all the way across. Alrighty. The next line I'm going to draw is a loopy line. So I like to go loop, and then it crosses over. Loop, 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 all the way across. Now, normally I do this with students in class, and so it's really awesome to hear everybody doing their loopy line and making that little sound effect. But since this year is a little bit different, some of you are going to be doing this at home, so you will be able to enjoy listening to it at home. And that's okay. We're doing the best we can. And maybe on this one, I'm going to make my loopy line go all the way across my whole entire paper. So you take some time and draw your loopy line. Alrighty. My next line, we like to call it the castle line because it kind of reminds us how a castle might look. So this one can be a little bit tricky, and that's why I normally show it first and then I help by saying the directions over while my students are doing their line. So when I'm doing this one, you might want to watch. When I'm doing this one, you might want to follow along as I'm saying what directions and everything for that line. So for our castle line, we come over, down, over, up, over, down, over, up, over, down, over, up, over, down, over, up, and then a little bit over to the edge of our paper. Okay, so now that you see how that works and you heard the directions, we're going to make one together on this paper. And I think that I am going to use a red. And I'm going to make this one kind of come across here maybe. Although that's getting really busy over there, so we're going to make it over here. Just kidding. So we're going to go over, down, over, up, 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 over, down, over. So now I have that nice castle looking line. So the next line, because I have room for one more, you might want to make up your own line. If you still have a lot more room, something that you could do would be to repeat these lines over again. So under here, start with your straight line and then do your wiggly line, just so that you're using the whole space of your paper. Another line that I like to show friends is a dotted line. So it doesn't always have to be attached to make it a line. So I can make some dots going all the way across. And this would be a dotted line. If you have a lot of room up at the top, you might scoot your dotted line up there. And I might make that yellow on this one. And if you can't see it, I promise it's there, because the yellow does not always show up really well in the videos. And I'm just using that dotted line to fill in this empty space. So one of the things that we're looking for is, did you use the whole space of your paper? And if I look at both of mine, this one is pretty full all the way down. This one is also fairly full all over the place. I don't have like a big, huge, empty space over in here. I really tried to move my lines around my paper. So this one is much more abstract looking because those lines are all over the place. They're bright and colorful. This one is a little bit more organized. Either way is totally fine because I'm still demonstrating the same skill. Now, if you are a friend who has paints, on this one, what I would do is I would get my paints and I would paint red across here, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. And then I would repeat it again. So I'm going to show you that part. And you could also color it in. Just like I'm going to paint mine, you can absolutely color yours in. So I'm going to get my paints and get set up, and I will check back in just a second to show you that step. Okay, I have my paint tray here, and I use tempera cakes, but watercolors are absolutely fine. If you have a different kind of paint, whatever works, whatever you have at home is totally fine. I also have my paintbrush and a water container. So these paints require that my paintbrush is wet ahead of time. So I do a sweep across the bottom, just kind of like I'm sweeping the bottom of that water container. I'm going to start with the color red. So I do a swirl, 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 nice and gentle. And if I look at my paintbrush, if you look at it over here, you'll see that my paintbrush is still having a good hair day. It's still nice and neat, although she's had a little bit of a dye job because she's red. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to fill the space from the top of my paper down to that very first line. And you see how my paint is getting kind of stringy over here? So it's not coloring as nicely. That means I do a dip in the water to get more liquid, do another swirl, swirl, and then my paint looks fantastic again. So when it starts getting really light like that, it means that you don't have enough water. And you don't want to go over the same spot over and over and over, because otherwise you're going to wear a hole right through your beautiful artwork. So now I'm going to switch colors. So I'm going to sweep, 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 and you'll see that the red is kind of coming off into the water. Okay, now I want you to notice I'm not tapping my paintbrush. I want that water on there so it will make my paint work a lot better. So I'm not tapping my paintbrush because it's going to fling water everywhere, and that's not what we want. So now I'm going to come to orange. And again, I'm doing a swirl, 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 almost like I'm a little ballerina dancing on my tiptoes. Still having a good hair day. And next, I'm going to paint this section all the way across. So I'm kind of using those lines to show me where I stop painting and where I start painting. So I am going to keep painting and filling this in, and I will check back in a minute when it is all finished. Now I have finished my painting, and what I want you to notice is that my paintbrush is still having a good hair day. It's not all crazy hair day up in here. So that shows me that I'm taking care of my materials and using them carefully and responsibly. So I would rinse out this color. Okay, now I would just drag it lightly across there because I don't want it to drip because I'm ready to put it away. So I make sure it's having a good hair day again. And then I would go lay it somewhere flat or bristles up in a cup, okay, to let it dry. You don't want to store it downwards because otherwise it's going to bend to this really nice point that we have back for our paintbrush. One thing that you could do is if you don't have paints, you could absolutely color these in with crayons. You could also use markers to color that in to add a little bit of color. This one is pretty nice and colorful how it is. If you want to add color to this, you are welcome to color in sections. What you might do is notice, hey, this loop right here is a little shape, so I might just color that shape in with a color. I might notice that this kind of makes a funky shape and color this in with one color. That's absolutely going to be a choice for if you want to challenge yourself a little bit, and that will also show me how neatly and carefully you can color. What I would prefer to not see is that you just decide to color the whole thing one color. All right, so these are our 2 different line assignments, and either one is totally fine, because what I'm really looking for is, can you draw different kinds of lines? And you demonstrated that on this paper or on that paper. You're showing me that you can draw different kinds of lines. I hope you enjoyed following along. Don't forget to turn in your work so that I can see it, and have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.